Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's get started. So let's get back into it. I thought I'd just take a second or two to recap some of the highlights from this morning. Julie Kashmiri from the Intel Corporation talking about their journey into programmatic, having to simplify her story when she's sat next to the CEO. And if you remember her metaphor, her real metaphor of that Japanese flower, the simplicity on the surface, but perhaps the complexity that sits underneath. Dylan laying down, as is the AppNexus way, not just one gauntlet, but several gauntlets around simplicity, transparency, advertiser demands, consistency, plenty of stuff to follow up on. And then we split, didn't we? I had in this room a panel talking about trust in the digital value chain. And again, there are some pretty consistent themes about doing more to set standards and doing more to break out of the silos and get different parts of the industry to work together. Because if we don't, then the complexity stays and the trouble begins. Earlier today, we had a session on data-centric marketing from Heather from MediaMath, which was sort of getting to a crescendo where she talked about sort of dynamic, data-driven programmatic campaigns and kind of joining the dots all together. And then we finished here before lunch with a session that Sam chaired on programmatic TV. And there, I think, as a theme that I've seen a few times, which is it's not about digital and analog. Actually, everyone can learn from each other. We talked about what digital can learn from TV, and a few weeks ago, in a similar session, we were talking about what digital buyers can learn from radio buyers, etc. So hopefully some good food for thought for you to nourish over lunch. I'm going to hand over to Sam. We've now got our second international keynote speaker. So I will not steal any of his thunder and let Sam introduce our next keynote. Thanks, Sam.
This is the last time I get on stage, I promise. So really excited to introduce you to the next, to this second international keynote, Beth Reilly. She's the head of global media and consumer engagement at Motorola Mobility, which is a Lenovo company. Beth started her career at Leo Burnett and then went across to Universal Studios, and then from there went into more brand side of marketing, and actually worked for a long time at Mondelez, and has been heavily involved in programmatic for quite some time. In fact, was I think the first marketer to run programmatic television in the Super Bowl. So we'll ask her about that a bit later. But in the beginning of her career, well before Leo Burnett, she started as a digital and social practitioner at Kraft Foods. So she's been in this space for quite some time. We're really excited to have Beth over from Chicago, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. She's very involved in the community and actually runs her own successful marketing consultancy business called Digital Matter. Welcome to Australia and welcome to the stage, Beth Reilly.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Sorry. I will be the first person to say I'm not a technology person. I'm a marketer, marketing in a digital world and in technology. Thank you, Sam, and everybody for welcoming me here. And like Julie, I have had many global jobs, but I have never been to Australia. So it's been a wonderful, we've been here for a week. My husband came with me. It's been amazing. Everyone's super welcoming. I think I was explaining to someone before, even though we do business here, we always seem to meet in Singapore, or everyone wants to come to the US. So we meet in San Francisco. So I was really thrilled when I was asked to come speak here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about launching a product with programmatic. Is it possible? The phone that we launched in the US in July of last year is not available here, but I brought the phone with me because it does require a little bit of a story, and you'll see through the presentation. But I wanted to start with a little bit of levity since it's post-lunch and everyone's probably in a little lunch coma. So This is a picture of my husband when I tried to explain what I was speaking on today. Kind of fear, eyes glazed over. And I frankly would be like that too. This is the definition when you search Google for what is programmatic. I mean, you probably get to the second line and he was like, what? Don't get it. So in the spirit of simplifying things, and I know we've been talking about this for 4 hours, but I just want to remind everyone that it is just simply automated, data-driven. It is designed to make your life simpler and easier as long as you have the right tools and the right partners. And I kind of want to remind people, and I think, Vijay, you mentioned this earlier this morning, but people, there's sort of this programmatic continuum where some people in this room might be on the far side there where like, what is this programmatic thing? I'm here to kind of learn what it is. All the way to full-on in-house programmatic buys, which I've been told Foxtel is doing, and then Intel, obviously, that's what they've just done, and my former employer, Kraft Foods in the US, has also brought their programmatic in-house. I will tell you a little bit about our journey, but we're probably in the space where programmatic is integral. It's an integral part of our media buys, but we are not ready to full-on bring it in-house, and I will explain why. So our journey at Motorola, we've dabbled over the last 2-3 years in programmatic across several partners. It's never been a big play. TV has always been the priority, mostly because our products are sold so well in other markets other than the US, where it may not be as developed. And when I say we're the number 2 handset in Brazil, probably number 2 or 3 in India. So, I mean, those markets, video is still very important to them, and so is TV. There are still people watching around a television in those markets. But in the US, it is having worked at a company, Mondelez, where we were using programmatic, and we were one of the first partners with Tube, now Adobe. Sorry, it's just so funny. I'm like, I have to say Tube, now Adobe. We decided we needed to get programmatic more into our media mix. And we were launching this new product, and this was a perfect time to bring on a new agency, an agency where they understood more in the programmatic space. We do not have the staff internally to run or bring programmatic in-house. So we asked Publicis Media to create a bespoke solution for us. They have an agency called Performix, and then they have MediaVest Spark. We wanted the traditional planning that's available at MediaVest Spark, but we also wanted the performance side and the more programmatic expertise from Performix. So they actually created a custom agency for us called Moto Momentum. I don't have their logo up here, but where the teams, in fact, moved offices. They moved to a central location and really created this special solution for us. I really feel agency partners are super valuable in this journey. I have to know a little about a lot of things, so I can't possibly, as you know, there are millions and millions of tech partners out there. They are really valuable in helping us sort through. And if there's trust with your agency partners and your technology partners, I think they can be a super valuable resource for you. I also wanted all the media in one place. I did not want siloed here. I did not want a search agency. I did not want a programmatic partner. I did not want a traditional buying and planning partner. I wanted it all in one place so that we could optimize real time, move dollars around as we needed. So I said that, optimize in real time. So we've determined that it's integral to our plan, but can you use it to launch a product? So the phone that we launched is the Moto Z with Moto Mods. So it is a modular phone. I have it here, I'll show it to you later. The mods are things like a battery pack, a projector, which my husband and I used last night to watch television on our hotel wall, was amazing. A sound boost speaker. They're still creating mods for it. There's some style caps. You can see the polka dots and the stripes. Those are all style, to create your individual style. Part of the problem, though, in the US, not only do we have to explain the mods, but our awareness in the US is really low. So like I said, we're the #2 handset in Brazil. We don't have an awareness problem there. In the US, if you mention you work for Motorola Mobility, people are all like, oh my God, I loved my Razr. How many people had a Razr? Lots. I had a hot pink one. I loved it. So that's a huge hurdle for us in the US. But put on top of that our exclusive launch partner is Verizon, and probably 85% of our sales go through Verizon stores in the US. And I mentioned this earlier, but mods and modularity require some form of storytelling. So there were a lot of hurdles. Put on top of that the senior leaders of Lenovo wanted a campaign that was primarily digital in nature. So when you have an awareness issue, I think we talked about this earlier, digital is not necessarily the best method, but we're gonna do what we can with it, and see how it goes. So that's the challenge we faced. So our strategy was to reach them using digital, employing targeting on a channel-by-channel basis, obviously, demographics, affinities, relevant environments, and leveraging content specific to the channel. We also keep in mind there are a lot of programmatic best practices to follow. So it's a cross-channel approach, can't plan in silos. That's why we brought on our bespoke solution. We wanted real-time optimization, a data-centric strategy, and innovate and be open to testing new products, which we did throughout the entire time. I will tell you, through this entire campaign, we had a war room set up, so we had daily meetings to talk about, and granted you cannot optimize daily, but which I tried telling the people at Lenovo, but we did have daily meetings and they were super helpful because you could see performance and where it was trending. And I think on a week-by-week basis, we made decisions on where we were shifting dollars and what was working. And we literally had creative pasted to the wall to see what creative was working best. And I think those are all things you need to keep in mind when you're on this journey. So our launch media approach, you can see, was 70% digital. And out of that 70%, and this was our initial approach, so I would say the programmatic probably went up to 25 or 30%. And then other things we ran: social, search, traditional mobile, online video, display, and some addressable TV. We also ran out of home, which was not digital, and we ran in cinema because when this launched in the US at the end of July, the cinemas are packed because all the blockbuster films are coming out. But again, we had to run things that we could highly target because Verizon was our biggest launch partner. So the consideration set, obviously social, the usual suspects, traditional pubs. We looked at, we ended up doing partnerships with CBS Sports, with CNET, and with Live Nation. And the reason we did these outside of programmatic was because we could negotiate content for them to develop that was included with our buy, and that content that then could be served up in our programmatic solution. Content is just such an important part of this. You have to have enough and the right amount and the right messages. And then our programmatic platforms that we looked at were Google, TubeMogul, Trade Desk, and Adelphic. What we ended up doing was using the data that we have, combining it with what little data Verizon actually gives us, along with third-party data and contextual retargeting. The two partners that we work with on a global basis are Tube and DBM, and then ran it through open exchange and private marketplace deals. I'm going to just pause because I see people taking pictures of it, so it's a lot. And just a note, we have, via Lenovo, a global relationship with Tube, now Adobe, and DBM, because we have a global partnership with Google, so we also run some things through DBM. I would encourage everybody, if you're doing a plan, to sit down and do this ahead of time. So we actually went through and identified what the programmatic key moment was, what the strategy was, what format the creative was going to take, the goal, and the KPIs, so that when we did sit down in those war room meetings, we could actually go through and decide what's working, what's not, remember what the KPIs are, our leadership was asking for measurement deck after measurement deck after measurement deck. So this at least grounded us, and we were able to go back and identify, okay, right, this isn't working, we don't have the right creative, this is not what we're supposed to be doing with this. And I could not resist putting an Academy Awards blunder picture in here. So I actually found this on Facebook. Some library in Wisconsin put these up as their like featured children's books. So the winner is La La Land. Oops, no, Moonlight. Sorry, so topical. I couldn't resist. Anyway, so what happened? It was the biggest new product launch in recent history for Motorola. Our reach against our Verizon consumer target was 85%. Our impressions were 140% over benchmark for the initial 6 weeks of the launch. Our overall brand interactions were up 60%. And like I mentioned, this real-time optimization allowed us to refine the buy and the creative as the campaign moved on. I will say one caveat, and this is what I mentioned earlier. Our awareness was super high among Verizon users, but it did not move overall in the marketplace. And this is where I say, so it was successful in what we set up to do, but overall, I think we still had an awareness issue at the end, and I will tell you, after the initial 6 weeks of the launch, we went back in and added some general television in, because I think, as you see, you don't want to just sell to Verizon users. Yes, that's our main target, but I think we needed to get the awareness built up in the rest of the marketplace. So lessons learned, and that was probably the biggest one. But awareness still requires a more traditional spend, for sure. I cannot stress this enough, but more creative variations. Not everyone in our audience was a male 18 to 34-year-old, but when we did the creative, that seemed to be what all the creative was targeted to. And when we did, like Verizon did a piece of creative and we asked if we could borrow it, it was targeted to moms, to females. When we did run that creative, sales spiked. So it's just really important to remember that you can't create, if you're gonna be doing programmatic, you can't just have one creative campaign, one theme. I would say align with a technology partner who has the best interest of your brand at heart. This is, when they don't own inventory, it means we can just really optimize, so, which was great. And I guess this whole demanding a holistic view of your campaign was one of the reasons we went with this agency solution that we did go with. And I can't stress enough, again, to work closely with your agency and technology partners. They all have very unique set of skills that they can add, and like I said, we're a very small team. And I feel like even just sitting next to you at breakfast, I learned stuff this morning because you guys know so much more. That's what you specialize in. So, and that really does help drive your business results. And I'm going to leave you with this. This is one of my favorite quotes. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. I would encourage anyone, like during the process, we were asked, T-Mobile came to us and said they were launching a new native product. Would we like to beta test it? Of course. I will participate in any test because it's so important for you to test things, because if you don't test and you don't fail, you don't learn. And you won't be able to be successful the next time. So I think I always leave all my presentations on this note because it is just so important to remember. And in this space, you really need to test. So with that.
You want to take your phone to the chin? You've got to take this phone down so you can actually have a look at it.
And Sam was really upset that we didn't launch it in this market. Yeah. So
I'm one of the Razor users evolved that I was obsessed with. There's also an incredible camera attachment as well, right? It has a zoom lens.
Yes, I forgot that. There's a Hasselblad 10x optical zoom camera attachment. I have with me today the projector and the speaker. The battery's in my purse, which comes in really handy. Although the phone has like 40 hours of battery. It's ridiculous. I know you have, I also have an iPhone, so I'll tell you. But
Don't say that.
Well, competitive. You have to compare your stuff, right? We all have, in our office, we have Samsungs, we have iPhones, but the iPhone battery will drain in about 2 seconds. This Moto Z will literally last all day. And I'm going to put this down so I can just show you how the mods go on and off.
Okay.
But you can ask me.
I've got a bunch of questions, but please put your hand up as soon as if you have any straight away, and I'll flick it to you. But I guess the first thing that I think is really interesting was your nails aren't big enough.
Yeah, I know they're not. This is just a style cap that goes on the back, and they're called hot swaps. So if the phone is, my phone's not up and running, but this is the projector. It's magnetic. It just snaps right on the back, and then you can see all my Facebook notifications if I turn it on. I don't know if it's gonna work because it's so light in here.
Yeah.
But it comes with a kickstand. Like, this is literally how there you can kind of see it. It's better if it's darker. But I literally watched my U.S. television off of my phone last night on the wall.
They watched the entire Oscars
I did watch the Oscars off of my phone and
in Australia,
in Australia.
linking into the US.
Yeah. And then I have the speaker. It snaps on the exact same way.
Righto, let's get this back on track.
Sorry.
So a couple of questions I've got for you, in no particular order. It looked very interesting that you set up, what was it called, Moto Momentum in the agency. That sounds like a really interesting strategy. That hasn't really happened a lot in Australia. How did you go through that? Was it disruptive? Was it new? How did the agency handle that conversation?
So I feel like, I did turn this back on, right? I feel like it's happening more and more to avoid conflicts in the US. I am a Publicis girl at heart. I started my career at Leo Burnett. It was private at the time, but it is now part of Publicis. And at Mondelez, we worked with Publicis and at Kraft too, with Starcom and MediaVest. I went to them knowing that they had two amazing agencies, but knowing that neither one of them had fully what I wanted. And I went to the CEO of now called MediaVest Spark in the US, Chris Booth, and I said, "This is what I'm looking for. Can you do this for me?" And they, they thought about it, and all the credit to them. They figured out a way to make it work because they had to move employees who are Performix employees over into an office where there are Spark employees. So they're actually somewhat competing agencies within the same network.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much it's happened, but they did create literally a separate legal entity for us in the US.
How's that changed your business though? Like, has it actually meant that they've got deeper claws into your business and the relationship? Do you feel stronger in the partnership because of it?
I don't know if I'm unique in this case, but from a client perspective, I really feel like my agency they are my partners. I don't hold meetings separately with media companies without my agency present. We're fully transparent, and maybe that I don't know if that's just me or it's because of this relationship we have with them. But I never saw the reason for not including them in everything. I will say, over my career, when I worked on the agency side, I was brought in to fill in for clients. So because they think of us as such, they think of the agency as such strong partners that they can come in and replace somebody on their team. I know when I went on maternity leave, I had agency people come in and fill in for my job while I was out.
Right.
So.
Okay. And were they involved in how you scoped the different technologies and made the decision on the technologies, or did you do that independently?
So that was done. In fact, we owned the relationships with, I can't even do it, Tube now, Adobe.
That's fine.
Sorry,
Move on.
it just sounds so funny. We own the relationships internally at Lenovo with Tube and DBM. So
why is that?
I just think that it was something pre-done at Lenovo, but even at Mondelez, we owned the relationships. I feel like it was our decision to make what technology partners we wanted to go with. And agencies work with so many technology partners. I think as long as they have a good relationship with the partner, it's totally fine for it to be owned. I think we felt like we got stronger because we have different agencies in every market.
Yeah.
And if we own the relationship, we can own the relationship worldwide.
Right.
Versus we only work with Momentum in the US, we don't work with them in other markets.
So your role is a global role. Does this technology relationship allow you to have a global view because of that?
I mean, not just because of that, but yes, I mean, it does help having the global relationship
Yep.
and being able to see, as with any company, you're not always going to get participation from your own internal people, but having the technology partner, you can go in and see what's going on in other markets.
Right. I want to get into the campaign a little bit because I thought it was fascinating, the daily pacing or the war room that you created. A couple of things. What were the kind of conversations that were really going on in that room? And then, because you mentioned it, how did the creative component of that start to transpire as you started to get real-time analytics and insight?
I will be totally honest on the creative part. I mean, the conversations happening were, what creative do we have? Literally paste them up on the wall. What's working? What has the best, engagement rate? What has, whatever it was for that channel. But we had also just brought on a new creative agency right before we launched the product.
Good decision.
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, they could not handle the pace of the creative that needed to be developed, so we actually turned to our partners a lot. Tube created a lot of creative for us, as did our agency, as did the media agency, believe it or not. They had creative resources to be able to take our assets and make them into stuff that would work, that would perform well and change headlines and test things. I think the conversations in that room, I mentioned this when I was presenting, but you cannot optimize on a daily basis. You don't have enough data. So I was constantly reminding people like, okay, I know it shows this today, but I think we need to wait at least for a 4-day build to see what actually is happening. Which is why I think we met daily, but by the end of the week was when we really started making decisions on what was performing well. Hey, maybe we should try things that are more targeted to women in this channel because it's performing better. Where can we get creative from? What should we test? Should we test this mod versus that mod? Should we test phone features versus mods? I mean, there's a lot of story to tell with this. I think when you say modularity with a phone, I know LG launched a modular phone last year, but it's nothing compared to this. And this requires a story. So it was what in that story is working? Is it the phone features? Is it the processor? Is it the fact that it's shatterproof? Is it, those were the kinds of conversations we were having.
So it sounds like that was just grabbing whatever you could get your hands on. But I mean, now in hindsight, if you could set up, from a creative lens, if you could set up the right model, what would that be?
As far as getting...
I guess the question's more around how does a marketer get closer to technologies and media driving and real-side insight to help with the creative process?
I've actually, because I just attended a conference in the US, and there are so many companies now that do almost automated creative for programmatic. I would almost like to test something like that in the next go around, so we're not scrambling at the last minute and going in with learnings from this campaign, knowing what worked, what didn't, and what was most efficient, going in ahead of time, having that stuff prepared, and having them do the creative, rather than trying to ask a traditional creative agency to come up with 20 different banners or 20 different video executions at the start.
Right. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Yes. Dan.
I'm Dan from OMD.
Dan, sorry, there's a speaker.
Throw it at him.
I get told.
Hi, I'm Dan Robbins from OMD. I really like the idea of the war room, and I'm sure it worked really well during the campaign. I just wonder how you've been able to then roll that on into kind of always-on activity versus then balance. Obviously, that would have taken a lot of resource to make that work. And how that's working for you now.
We don't have the war room on a daily basis anymore. It was really set up for probably the first 8 weeks of the campaign. However, I think anytime we launch a product, it's a good idea to have that for the first six to 8 weeks of the campaign. Not only from what media is working, but also, like I mentioned, the creative aspect of it, and what's more efficient, what's working. And I'm sorry, I forgot the first part of your question. You asked.
Always on. So
Always on.
do you have an always on strategy, and how does that?
So technology is very interesting. Having worked in packaged goods, we did have an always-on strategy. In tech and telco, our budgets are released quarterly, so it's very difficult to have an always-on strategy. I would say at a minimum, what we do have always on is some baseline programmatic running and search. But anything that's kind of pulsed up and down depending on what budgets have been released. I will give you a for example. It could be December 31st and the new quarter starts January 1st and we have no approved media dollars or budget, and I'm asking for, can someone just approve $1 million so I don't have to go dark in search and programmatic. So it would be wonderful if we could have an always-on, complete always-on strategy, but we do at least try to keep some baseline programmatic and search running, so we're not completely dark.
Any other questions? Oh, yep. Andy.
Ready?
I want to take that
Obviously not
back
an
with me.
Yeah.
Obviously not an athlete. Hi, my name's Andy, ex-client, ex-agency, ex-trade desk, now with TapAd. Question for you. I think I've been in the agency space in Asia for about 26 years, and about 20 of that in Asia across. I'm based in Singapore now, but across Asia. I think that's one thing that's actually getting really, really apparent. And what's interesting with your presentation is the fact that although you guys used agencies, you guys chose which tech partner to use. And one thing you said was because you want to get closer to the tech. Can you just go into a bit more detail? What do you mean? How did you make the decision? And the reason I ask the question is because obviously here it's getting, I mean, especially in Australia, definitely transitioning to more in-house technology and so on. But outside in the broader Asia Pacific industry area, it's gonna get to be a problem, but it hasn't hit it yet. So just out of curiosity.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Sorry, I'm not gonna throw this at anyone because I'm really
I
bad.
came in, so Motorola's been through sort of ups and downs. I don't know if you know, it was a privately held company. It was bought by Google. It was sold by Google to Lenovo. So the tech partners that we work with, and not that I wouldn't have worked with too, because we worked with them when I was at Mondelez, but they were already predetermined by Lenovo. So they had already done the due diligence and gone and found global partners that they wanted to work with. So I didn't honestly really have a say in the partners we were working with. But I do think the reason we want the partnerships internally is because then we can control the partnerships, we can control it's consistent globally, so we don't have somebody in another market choosing a different partner. When we run a lot of global campaigns. The creative is already out there and exists. It's already in, Tube already has it. They can help us out on a global basis. So I think if I would have made the decision, I probably would have gone with the same partners. Because when you run global campaigns and you have different agencies in every market, it just helps to have at least a technology partner that is the same in every market. When I was at Mondelez, we actually only had 2 agency networks globally that we worked with. It was much easier. I want to say Lenovo has like 75 agencies on a global basis. And then when you bring in, Motorola, we had totally different agencies. So even in the US, Lenovo has a different agency than we use. For the PC side, has a totally different agency. So I think getting closer to the tech is that we can actually control that globally. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Basically, the baseline is having something you can use across the world.
Yeah.
That you can measure across the world and also based on support.
Correct.
Because the main thing is the agency, or proliferation of agencies, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's tough. Like I said, at Mondelez, it was not even a question because we worked with Publicis and with Denso Aegis. And they communicated very, very well together. But when you have 75 agencies and you're trying to, communicate with the PC side of the business and get efficiencies from there, and they have different targets than we do, and then the mobile side of the business, it just gets too complicated. So I just think that's probably one of the reasons why we hold the tech relationships internally and globally.
Okay, final question then. You've obviously got a visibility across the globe of all markets. across a lot of different technologies. You've been in the programmatic space for well over 6 or 7 years. What are you excited about in the future?
So not to segue perfectly from your PTV thing, but I really want to get more into the programmatic TV space. I think it just brings everything full circle. And I know we ran the spot at Mondelez during the Super Bowl. It was just a test. You know, it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Can you do it? Yes, it can be done. And during such a high-profile event as the Super Bowl. But I will tell you, I so desperately wanted to run programmatic TV, and we worked with your team in the US during our fourth quarter because rates were so high if you went out into the scatter marketplace, and we decided at such a late time to run television, it would have been the smartest thing to do and the most efficient thing. It ended up not working out. We ended up not running it, but that is the one thing that I really am excited about. As you know, the fragmentation in the US is like ridiculous in the TV space, and I just think this is another way we can accurately target. So that's the thing that most excites me.
Well, Beth, thank you very much. It was really insightful, and we
Thank you.
really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Beth. Lots of very useful insight from your daily stand-ups, your KPIs, agencies and trust, test and learn, how to go about optimization. Lots of practical guidance, so thank you for that. We now split into 2 streams again. In this room, Rhys Williams from DoubleClick will talk to us about advertising in an AI-first world. And in the parallel session, Kat Prestopino from AdRoll will talk about performance marketing and how does your performance stack up. So you've got the next 2 or 3 minutes to decide which stream you're going to pick, and then we'll get going.